Welcome to the Love, Sex, and Leadership podcast, where you can discover simple tantric teachings to embody your true power, awaken your soul's wisdom, and live an inspired life as a natural, intuitive, and heart-centered leader. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Love, Sex, and Leadership. I am extremely grateful today to have a dear friend, Margot Anand, with me, and diving into this conversation of really all three of these, because I know it's a conversation you know very well, and you've been in this a very long time. And I also just want to give gratitude. When my book, The Embodied Man, came out a couple of years ago, Margot beautifully endorsed that. We've, really since then, I've formed a beautiful friendship. And when I'm here in Bali, landing and grounding, we often catch up and have dinners and coffees. And I really appreciate what you've brought to this field and just who you are in the world. And I'm very grateful to be here with you today.
Thank you. And I can say also that I appreciate the man who brings together the qualities of being centered, male, and yet feminine, soft, very good looking, very sexy looking, and very deeply looking into the truth of, the subject of leadership and awakening and Tantra and sexuality. So it's an honor to be here with you because I know you understand the topic, and I'm very excited and looking forward.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think the first thing I want to dive into is, like, for you, I know you've done lots of interviews through the years, but when you really first started to bring this work into people's lives, like, what were some of the first, like, the major challenges you felt like you met? I mean, I know there's been a lot through the years, but when, I look at where people are now around sexuality, and there's a lot of, holding back, and I can only imagine where it was, when you were really bringing this into the world. I'd love to just hear some of that perspective and what you've observed, between then and what you're seeing now.
Well, it started out in a very unusual way because I was studying psychology at the Sorbonne, and I was very unhappy with what they were teaching. It was analyzing human behavior through statistical analysis, so many statistics, so many people behave this way, therefore their character is this way. I hated it. So then I met a therapist, an American therapist who has a growth center in London. So we fell in love. So I moved to London. Then I decided, I want to study, humanistic psychology, but not in his center, in another center. So I started to study this, and then they told me the program director, his name is Viresh, and he has a center in Holland, and he's going to direct the program here in London. And your first appointment to meet your director is going to be on Monday at 6:00. This is the address. You go downstairs, second door on the left. Okay, fine. So I go there. I'm very innocent. I'm from a bourgeois kind of high society background, and I'm like stepping into the wild new world. And I go down and I open the door. And what do I see? I see this kind of dark-skinned man whose head is, popping over bubbles of soap in a bubble bath, and saying to me, come on, join me in the bathtub for your interview. And I'm going, oh, okay. So this was my first interview with this new director, who then proceeded to put me into an extremely intense marathon, in which I was attacked on all sides by people accusing me rightly of being superficial, of being a false blonde, of, always smiling all the time, totally not real, not in touch with her feelings, and pushing until I finally exploded, which was the goal. And I got very mad at everybody. And then I started crying. And then I learned the connection between anger and sadness and tears. How sometimes you have to go through your anger, to open up your heart, and to allow your emotions to be expressed. So that was my beginning into humanistic psychology.
Deep immersive right into it.
Yeah. And then eventually many things happened, which I actually describe in my book, Love, Sex, and Awakening. So if you want to see all these adventures of initiations, you can read that book.
Highly recommend.
But the first group I led was simply offered to me because the group leader in the center that my boyfriend was leading was sick.
Mm.
So then they said, okay, you're studying psychology, you go and lead that group. Well, I had never led a group. So it was wonderful. I just jumped in and I found that, I had the talent and I could handle it. Yeah. And then I continued to study and I continued to explore, and I went to SLN and I studied psychology around the world. And then my first sexual experience, I was 17 and a half and I was a virgin. I had a complete mystical experience where I became pure light. And as you know, when you become pure light, you have much information available to you, but you don't have boundaries, you don't have schools, families, educations, countries, you're just light, you're everywhere. So I woke up. I realized that sex was a door to the spirit. Sex was a door to the mystical dimension. So that got me going. So as soon as I could, I went around the world and studied all the traditions of sacred sexuality, and ended up at the Woodstock Festival and, took acid, the whole thing. And so my trajectory into Tantra actually started in a very, very strange adventure, very unexpected. So I went to, I was in Paris studying, and then I finished my studies, and I went to America because I wanted to find a guide for my first acid trip. So I went to see Timothy Leary, who gave me a wonderful tab of acid and gave me the address of a friend of his who was potentially being my guide. And this friend was an Indian guy who was very ambitious and wanted to become a guru and had recently come to New York. And so we made a deal, that I was going to take my acid tab and he was going to be along the corridor in another room, and he was a psychic, so he was be able to tune in with me what I was going through, and he was a little bell, and if anything went wrong, I could ring the bell. Okay, fine. So I changed my clothes, I took all my underwear off, I put a nice white dress, and I took my pill after many ohms on the pill, and I started my journey. And that's the first time that I could say today that I went in the past life that was completely tantric, So I realized what that was. And then I was lying down and I was navigating through other dimensions. And the next thing I know, I kind of come out of my navigation and I find myself in the Yab-Yum position, sitting on the knees of this guide who mysteriously appeared in the room when he wasn't supposed to. And then looking a little deeper, I realized that, my pelvis was like an aquarium. And in this aquarium was a fish flowing. And the fish was my friend's Vajra, or my friend's penis, who was floating in my aquarium. But because I was tripping and I was in a jolly mood, I kind of looked at this aquarium and felt this fish. And then I started to see many other fishes, visualizing, tripping. And then I started laughing my head off. And when you laugh, it's a kind of a mini orgasm, and then you shake your pelvis, and pretty soon my friend's fish dropped out, and he was very ill at ease. It was like, obviously he was found out.
Yes.
So we had a salutation, and he went back to the end of his corridor and let me alone. So then he brought me at the end of the trip, he brought me to the taxi station. I went home, I took all the vitamins, and I slept, and everything was fine. With me, it was fine. I had no problem, no trauma. I just thought it was a funny thing, to suddenly be invaded by fishes.
Yeah. I love the way you put that.
And, when I wrote my book, that story's in my book, and my American publisher called me and says, you cannot write a chapter where you say that you were basically raped. You were on a kind of a date rape, and you have fun and you laughed and you saw fishes. All our readers that have not had such a good experience are going to be very shocked by the way you put it across. So I had to kind of temper my whole story and kind of, bring a little more down-to-earth expressions about it. But anyway, so that was, my many different introductions to Tantra, the mystical explosion, the invasion of the fishes, the Woodstock Festival, and and eventually I went around the world and I did a lot of groups at Esalen, fantastic experiences. And I didn't lead groups. I didn't lead Tantra groups for a very long time. I wanted to explore. I was curious. And I learned and I practiced 20,000 therapies, which then allowed me to avoid all the traps you were talking about with our friends, such as, exploding your emotions as a woman and not being able to contain them. So, I try to remember, I think, I remember the first Tantra group. It was quite wonderful. It was with Viresh, my teacher.
Oh, teacher friend,
Yeah, so it was wonderful. It was, it was all kind of walking on the beach, all this. But the serious stuff started, actually, because those groups were not really Tantra groups. They were just therapy groups. But when I went to see Osho, suddenly, after some time spent at the ashram, he called me up and he said, "You're going to be leading the first Tantra group in the ashram." And the ashram, it was not legal at this point to do these things. This was in the 70s. And I looked at him and I said, "Osho, I'm Sorbonne-trained Western psychologist. I have no idea how to lead a Tantra group. What am I going to do?" And then he looks at me, he laughs, and he says, "Oh, well, if you don't know what to do, close your eyes, call me in, and I will do it through you." Now, you could think that would be an honor. But in my case, it was the most horrible thing he could have done, because I was struggling to find my own voice for the first Tantra book I was writing, which I was doing at home behind the ashram. So I didn't like that someone would come in, and tell me, "I'll do it through you." Because I'd already thrown out manuscript number 1, too much influence from my publisher. I had already thrown out manuscript number 2, too much influence from my husband. And now, too much influence from my master. So, anyway, the first group happens. Everybody walks in naked. We've all been medically tested. It's pre-HIV time. We walk in. Men and women, all sent personally by Osho through a darshan with the master. You couldn't come otherwise. And we're all naked sitting there. And I'm going, okay, so what do I do now? This is supposed to be a Tantra group, So I do nothing. I just sit and wait and sit and wait. 15 minutes go by. Half an hour go by, the women are watching the men are watching the woman, the steam is rising, the cooking pot is cooking, and at some point, maybe 45 minutes into the process, suddenly, some woman says, "I hate men." And that was the beginning of the breakthrough, and the man says, "All women are bitches." And so I thought, okay, here we go, And then they started to scream at each other, exactly what you were talking about in the previous talk. Scream, and, the deal was you don't hit each other, we had agreed. But I was going around and encouraging them to scream and to let it all out. And then you could see how healthy and wonderful it was to have the possibility of allowing people to actually express all their cultural repressions and all the things that had been hampering them in their sexual life and all the abuse that they had gone through. Man, it was big. It lasted hours. And then it quieted down and we all took a group shower and then came back, and now it was time for the heart to open and the group continued. So that was my first real serious Tantra group.
Wow, that you just naturally kind of found yourself inside of. And did you feel like in that moment there was a spirit or energy of just something that kind of knew what to do in a sense?
Yes. It was, recently I was interviewed by the Ministry of the Interior in France, who was doing a inquiry about this topic of Tantra. And then they asked me, "So what was Osho for you?" And I said, which I mean to be true, that Osho, of all the masters that I have learned from, that I had hang out with, he was the best. And I said, why? Because he's the one that really taught me to trust, going very deep into my own intuition, into my own soul, and receiving the information in the moment of what had to happen. And that because I could trust that, and I didn't need to bring it through a book or, through some kind of ready-made formula, because I could trust that, that's why I became a good group leader, I believe,
I love that you share that, because that's something for me in my own journey over the last 15 years. Like, there was a lot of study and a lot of research. And now I find the best thing I need to do is just empty myself out. It's just to let myself become a channel of spirit, and the answers and the things I need are right there.
Right.
So yeah, to hear that now from you is, it's like that kind of validation of, okay, you're doing exactly what you meant to do here. This makes sense. Because my logic, like, maritime military brain is you need all of that, and so that's like, actually I can just listen to spirit. I can just let myself be a channel of God.
And it's extreme. It's very extreme, because at some point, I work in many countries, and at some point I was working in Germany and I had lost my German. But I had gone to a master who was talking in English and was simultaneously translated in German, which allowed me to take notes, over a long period of time in English, in German. I mean, I was assimilating all this. Very deep, long time. And then when I went to teach in Germany, all of a sudden, I was thinking the word in English, and poof, the word in German fell in my brain, and I found myself speaking German fluently.
Wow.
Just like that.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, I had learned German at school, but I had forgotten it. But to say the degree to which we can perceive, through our non-analytical brain is awesome. Awesome.
Love that. A question for you, with what you saw initially in group spaces and Tantra groups, many years back compared to what you see now, especially around sexuality, where I feel like pre-HIV and before these things, groups were maybe a bit more extreme in some sense. You still can see groups in that way, but where do you feel like that differentiation is? And do you feel like the field is lacking because of that, not inability to let erotic body flow, but there's just so much more legislation and laws, and some of it is from a place of deep integrity and reality, and also some of it is coming, I think, from just a changing society. So I'm just curious your perspective, especially around the sexuality, erotic component inside the group space.
Well, I developed a book called The Art of Sexual Ecstasy, which was completely experiential, and where I asked myself the question, what is an orgasm? How do you develop a full body orgasm? I went to Osho, I looked at the Kundalini meditations, and I was studying bioenergetics, and I realized that it was not complete, this meditation. Things had to be added. So I wrote a whole process called the dynamic streaming process, the art of relaxing in high states of arousal. And little by little, what happened is my interest was to model the sexual orgasmic experience in the group room in a way that was as complete as possible, as highly energetic as possible, including everything that normally happens in your sex life, but no penetration. And so people were left pretty high by the end of the day, and there were condoms under the altar, and they were all encouraged to make a date, and to meet in the night and to repeat in bed in their intimacy what they had learned during the day. And then to bring their feedback the next day. And so this is how I proceeded, there was never any so-called temple nights where people were making love, but I have no, how do you say, judgment or resistance to the sexual process. I think it's a great thing. But I'm beyond it now at my advanced age.
You're very young, beautiful age, darling.
So I am now, studying what is the passage and the relationship between the orgasm of the body and the orgasm of the spirit, which is bliss. And I'm getting more interested in the ways and the shortcuts that can take us to bliss. Because I have discovered as a therapist, which I was in the beginning, that therapy, as it was practiced, Gestalt and bioenergetics and psychoanalysis and all these things, took a long time, to get to the root of the problem and to solve it and to discharge, all the charges. And so I invented a shortcut, which has worked until this day. And I'm not the only one who invented it, but somehow I discovered later it existed. But in my reality, I developed this thing called the inner flute. So it's the equivalent of the Sushumna, but the Sushumna can be dangerous. If you channel sexual orgasmic electric energy through the Sushumna, you can go into places that are not good.
Definitely.
There are books written about it.
I've seen this. Yep.
So I developed this central channel, and a lot of my work is due to high intense energy work, developing the orgasmic response on each of the chakra levels until you get to the higher samadhi point at the crown chakra. Now, when people arrive at that place and they can expand their consciousness to become one with all that is, they're healed, okay? Because they know that the small problematic contrast-seeking contradiction that their ego is going nya about, is basically nothing compared to this incredible, expansive place where they discover their sovereignty as a divine human being. And when you discover your sovereignty, you become the master of your destiny. You know that you don't have to listen to mommy and daddy and your government and you whatever to decide what is good for you and to decide what life you want to lead. It's a huge jump and it's a big healing, because from that place you can go back down and you can see all the blockages you create for yourself, but you're much more able to take responsibility, So that's one point that is very important. And in this travel to the bliss, to the orgasm of the spirit, there's many other points, In the heart is the compassion. In the third eye is the discovery of what the Buddha, gave enormous importance to, which is the witness. Now, when you are able to have consciousness watching itself, being conscious, when you're able to come to that point, you have a moment, a split second of total freedom of choice, okay? You see, you witness yourself, and you know that I like to, in my work, show there's two paths, the dark and the light. So you have the dark one, that is the one of resistance, where you go, nya, 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 and this is not going to work, and about sex especially. Okay, and then you have developed what I call your personal mantra, which is, I don't know, it could be I'm an orgasmic woman or, and then you remember this mantra, which is basically the ultimate outcome of your success, where you want to go as a sexual human being. And if you repeat that at that moment of that total moment of witnessing, consciousness witnessing itself, and you give yourself the choice to choose between the ego place or, the sovereign spirit place, and you choose the sovereign spirit place, you got it made. That's it. You can navigate through all the things we were talking about and the resistances and you can remember who you truly are. You are a being of light. You're a being that can achieve total success in whatever you want to achieve, And for me, the definition of total success has definitely changed.
I'm curious to dive into that more. I just want to break down what I heard you say in that is that there's this place of kind of that split in the road where you can stay almost in the personality of the ego.
Yes.
And then there's also the place of recognizing the transpersonal soul that's timeless, that's spaceless, that's eternal, that's connected to the all of everything of existence.
Yes.
And, in that capacity to choose through the witness, where does the someone who wants to both stay in the body but also stay connected to that space? So this is where I see a lot of spiritual traditions, they just ascend. They ascend. And one of the things that draws me to Tantra is the pace of descending into the body. Yes. But I also see people really always chasing that bliss experience out of the body, even in the field of Tantra. And so, like, for a pilgrim, someone finding their way in this, where's that communication point to be able to fine tune that navigational point in consciousness right there?
Okay, I was telling you that the central channel was called the inner flute. Okay, when you make love, when you arouse your excitement and your sexual energy, you're like a musician that is ready to, well, if you have done your work to open your flute, okay, to know how to play the flute, that is a preliminary thing. But let's say that you can do that. Now you take this energy, which we do all in my workshops and my trainings intensely, and you navigate this energy, it's an incredible tool for life, I can tell you. It's the opening the central channel that's it. But anyway, so now you can feel your sexual energy, but you can pull this sexual energy to the heart. You can melt with your partner, feeling the oneness in the heart, opening your compassion to the other. Then you can move it to all the other central channels, which central chakras, which then give you a completely different quality, which, maybe we don't have time to analyze here. But when you're at the height of this wonderful, blissful moment, you haven't abandoned the root. You go back down to the root and up the root. And this is where the Yabum practice of, man sitting in lotus and woman sitting around him and being inside each other, that's when it comes in. Because we teach people in my groups, in my seminars, in the love and ecstasy training, how to open that channel together. So they have the sex sensations, and then they navigate the sex sensations up the chakras. They give it through their breath to the other partner who, exhales it down and gives it to you through your sex, etc. So there's a whole weeks of practice, where people can basically explore the alchemy that the Middle-Age magicians were talking about, saying transforming base metal into gold. Because that's what it really was. They were secretly practicing Tantra, but because they were in the moment of, the Inquisition, they had to let everybody think that they were creating gold and they were, but that's what it really was, So there's no question about abandoning the sexuality. No, not in my school. In Skydancing Tantra, the fuel is the energy of life, but the energy of life is sexual, but it's also beyond sexuality. It's actually what lights up every movement in your life, in your body, your peristaltic movement, your heartbeat, your breathing, it's the base of life. So you connect with that all the time, and there's 1,000 ways to do it. And the more you do it, the more you realize the incredible perfection of creation, And when you get into such a moment of perfection, what are you going to complain about, I
was just, one of the groups I was just leading, one of the practices I love is just a laughter meditation. And that deep place of laughter, because I always find it, until you can laugh about it, like that thing still has you. Yeah. That thing still has you.
Yes.
Until you can laugh about it, it's still like gripping into some aspect of your personality that hasn't had a place to actually just laugh at the big cosmic joke of what's happening here.
But I think that lovers today, one of the things I benefited from a lot through my curiosity, I have done so many therapies. And there was a point where I was the #1 encounter group leader in Germany. When I walked in the room, everybody was pissing in their pants. Because an encounter group is basically allowing you to shout and scream, at the other person and tell them everything you hate about them. Okay, that's what wasn't it. Now, it was in high fashion. Now it's not in fashion anymore. But what I'm saying is, like, if you had a chance to learn about the importance of catharsis, about bioenergetics, about all these things, you start to understand how to regulate your emotions. But one of the ways I understood it the best, which I think should be taught to all your men and your women, is like this. I had a wonderful partner. We're still teaching together. He's American. And we lived together. And being, 20, 30 years old and having emotions, I would barge into his office and I would say, right? And he would be Olympian and look at me and say, no, we can't do it like this. We have to take an appointment for a meeting. And I thought to myself, what? I have all these emotions and now I have to wait until I have an appointment for a meeting to let them out? This is ridiculous. But okay, I loved him, I had to listen. So I thought, okay, 5 o'clock tonight, that's when I can let it out again if it's still there. And then after that, we were facing each other. We put a pile of cushions in the middle. And all my gripes and my complaints about this guy went to the cushion. And he was sitting there, Olympian, kind of cool, male, taking it all in. By the time I was finished, the heart opened and we had a hug and that was the end of it, So it's like we have to find ways of understanding that, according to many masters, emotions are just an expression of the mind. And that waking up is not stopping there, that waking up is realizing that this too is an illusion, and the one that is pushing your buttons is your best teacher,
showing you where all the blind spots are that you haven't been willing to love, honor, and appreciate inside yourself. Yeah, for sure. Another question around just leadership. I love talking about this intersection between sexuality and leadership, and having run a successful company for a long time now, and being a woman, and just curious how that journey has been for you around having teams and crews and many teachers, and where some of the, you could say, both the pitfalls as well as the areas you feel like you really have done well and celebrated, and what you've learned the most in that kind of leadership aspect, specifically around the the kind of entrepreneur, if you will.
Yeah, well, it all started with me realizing very early on that I couldn't be a good teacher and an administrator at the same time. I knew it in my 20s already. So I picked an administrator. Out of the blue, Spirit picked it for me, someone in the group that was participating. She happened to be a midwife. 35 years later, she's still my organizer.
Wow.
Number one, where we have many more now. But so that was the first thing I noticed. If you want to be a good leader, don't pile it all on yourself, but choose what you're good at and get people in a team to help you. The next thing is to be able to really build a good team, But the good team can only be built if they go through the process, in my case, of the love and ecstasy training, which is the sky dancing Tantra process. They have to have taken that process. They have to go to the place where they fall in love with this work. They have to go through the experience where it has changed their life, because it does that. It's a very, very deep and radical process. 2 years now. It used to be 1, now it's 2.
Amazing.
So it's 3 weeks a year. So once they're in there, they want to participate. They want to stay in the whole process. They want to be a team member. So that's number 2. Number 3, give people the right title. So don't take them in a workshop and say, you're going to be staff or you're going to be a team member. Say to them, you're going to be the guardian of time. You're going to be the guardian of knowledge, the one who takes notes about the program. You're going to be the guardian of logistics, the one who relates with the house, and so on and so forth. You got to be Margot's guardian angel. You get her a cup of tea when she wants it, whatever. they're guardians, you know. So now this got developed so well that we have a manual for the guardians.
Wow.
You know, and all the jobs that they have to look at, and the guardian of the temple, and, you know, change the water, flower, and all that. We have it, man, tip top, you know.
Amazing.
And now we have a problem that the guardians want to be guardians every year. They don't want to give their place to the newcomers.
They like their guardianship.
And then, okay, so how do you, you know, build a team? You have your meals together. You have your lunches together. And I bring the main problems that I have seen in this morning's process put that in the middle of the table. And I ask each of the team members, okay, how would you, in your best wisdom, resolve this problem? They give their solution. Everybody gives their solution. And then it's my job to say, well, I could take a little bit of what you said and what you said, but I would solve it this way. So this is what we're going to do because I have the authority finally. So everybody participates, you know. And then the other rule is, okay, when the evening sessions are finished, you're free. And if you want to be lovers with people in the team, hallelujah, have a good time.
Yep.
And, you know, but people work hard, you know, starts at 7 a.m, goes until 11 at night.
For sure. I'm curious, and we were talking to you a little bit in between sessions here, but just how you've observed both personally as well as, you know, professionally with the power dynamic that gets to be at play when you're in a group space that's working with erotic energy. You know, the natural projection that a student puts on teacher. You know, I'm curious for both the sky dancing perspective as well as, you know, what you've seen and observed and where your edges have been with that, you know, and because it's a very hot topic in this Tantra sexuality field. There's a lot of things circulating around with it. You know, I'd just love to hear your kind of take on that. And
well, you know, one of the reasons why we're very successful is because we have an absolutely ironclad ethical guidelines, you know. And some of them are, if you're a group leader in the process of sky dancing, you don't have any romantic interaction with your participants for the first, now it's gotten down to 6 months, but in my time it was 1 year. So I have some participants, you know, who waited a year and called me back a year later and we became lovers and so on and so forth, you know, but so that's one thing. The other thing is we've had all sorts of situations, you know, horrible ones where we've had to throw out one of my co-leaders because he was, you know, fucking the participants because they were seducing him behind my back and they weren't using condoms. I mean, you know, they were participants who had somehow not resolved their mother-father complex and they wanted to destroy the mother-father couple. And we've had, you know, a black magician, you know, who, you know, did horrible things that also had to be thrown out. We had all sorts of situations that we had to deal with. It wasn't easy. Tantra is not an easy path. That's why it's called the shortcut for the courageous, you know. You know?
Sounds very accurate.
Yeah. So how that I dealt with it was remembering something very important that Freud has taught us, okay? That when the man and the woman come in the group room, okay, all the participants are there and they're looking at daddy and mommy who are going to be healing their wounds. Okay? Now, if there is a group leader there who has not taken care of their personal sexual needs, they're going to start to be leaking and they're going to, you know, try to pick these girls for the night, etc. I saw it all happening in Pune because the beauty of it when it all started under Osho, there were no rules, no guidelines, no schools where Tantra was taught, nothing. It was created between Osho and the group leaders. That was me. So I had open door to Osho. I could ask him any question. But as it is, that's not the way to do it. Because what happens is there's transference, okay, onto the group leaders, but there is counter-transference. And if you don't realize the counter-transference of the one that is transferring on the participants, you create such a confusion,
Mm.
and it doesn't look like that in the beginning, because then they will bring forth the argument, as they have here around in Ubud, that, well, every high level initiation, the Tantra teacher takes the one who's ready, and she's initiated into being a Dakini, and now they make love and she has the cosmic orgasm of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. This happened with every big teacher. Nobody knows about this. I happen in my position to know that every big teacher in the West, in America, every guru coming from India teaching that, this and that, everybody had a secret lover.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these secret lovers wrote books when the guru disappeared or went back to India or died or whatever. And these books always testified about the big confusion that was left, in that secret lover's place and life and sexual life after this happened, So, yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to be chosen as the third concubine in a tantric relationship with a great tantric guru who was a magician and had 2 wives. And the 2 wives approached me and asked me if I wanted to be the third concubine. And they were very rich, so they could take care of my finances, which at the time was great for me because I was coming back from India, writing a book and broke. And it was an incredible experience, to go through that, these rich people, and me, the third concubine, and him having such an incredible reputation as a lover. People were queuing up down the street, to have a session with him. So, I had a lot of experience, and how I handle it is, it depends on the situation, It depends on the situation. I take it as far as it can go, allowing the person, my co-leader, to do whatever they need to do. I don't intervene, I don't interfere, but we have rules, before we start. And we agree on the rules, but the rules are often broken when the person has no integrity,
So integrity, really.
Integrity is very important, very important.
I teach for a number of different organizations, and some, one of the Tantra schools I teach for, there's no genital touch, and it's just a very clear, safe container, and I see beautiful advantages in that. And then another school I teach for, there can be much more interaction, and I see advantages in that, and I see disadvantages on both sides.
Yes.
So I kind of navigate this place of, I'm putting on different hats depending on the group space that I'm walking into. I love that because I get to be
that's very good.
Variety of different ways rather than always having some.
Then you don't get attached as this is the only way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you bring this up about every, teacher you come across has had some level of initiation. And this is a conversation that often comes up when this dialogue comes in. It's like, where is that initiation really present? I look at my own tantric journey. I was actually, here a long time ago, met a beautiful tantric woman that really initiated me a lot into this path and, introduced ways of lovemaking and connection and communication that were quite natural to me. I just never had the context around it.
Yes.
And she was very much an initiatrix for me. And I love when a female body has been able to support that for a man in that sense. And of course, I see the very gray area that comes in, especially for someone as myself, as a male body teaching in this field. That level of integrity, I feel like I have to over exemplify.
Yes.
And it's easy for me. And I got laid a lot more before I was teaching Tantra than after.
Yes, that's important. That's important, to really, get your druthers out, as they say, Me too. I tried everything, and it's important.
Yeah. And I tried not to teach Tantra for a while just because of the misunderstanding and the perceptions around it. But in my meditations, it just kept leading me back there. And I said, actually, I need to help create a better name for this in the world and help people understand more of the mystic connection of meeting heaven and earth and being, divinity inside.
You're doing great.
Experience.
You're doing great. If people ask me what is, the Tantra teacher you could recommend, I always mention you and Sarita.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you. Another, questioning your own journey right now. Obviously, you're You're getting younger by the day. Absolutely. More beautiful as well, though.
Thank you.
May I say? And what's on the forefront for you? Like, what is it that's alive in your body that the life force inside of you wants to create and manifest and bring out into this world?
Well, my last tour was absolutely extraordinary, and I had a great group leader, co-leader. We love each other a lot. He's Italian. He's fun. Anyway, we did Brazil. We did all sorts of countries. And at the end, he asked me, do you have any free space on your agenda before your 80th birthday? And I looked and I said, yeah, there's a week here. I said, okay, please, let's go to Portugal. I'll organize your group. Okay. So him and his girlfriend, who's a very smart organizer, they put together this incredible group where we had 76 participants plus the team, coming from 28 different countries and 4 different continents, okay? Wow. From all over, black, white, transsexual, gays, everything was there, okay? Buddhists, Christians, Anyway, and I looked at this group and I said, if I pull it off, then I can truly say that my work has a universal impact. And I pulled it off. And the title, I let my co-leader choose the title for this group.
Amazing.
And it was The Golden Keys to Happiness. So I thought, okay, what are my golden keys? And I don't remember all the 5 because we have 5 days, but one of them was laughter and humor.
Yes.
And another one was tenderness, which we have to talk about this, by the way.
Yes.
So anyway, it was a great group. It went well. And then we went and we had an incredible 80th birthday with 3 days of surprise rituals for Margot. And, it was really beautiful. Then I announced that I was stopping working. And then I had a revolution. Everybody complained. You can't do that. You're at the height. You're at the height of your career. How can you? So I said, okay, I'll take a sabbatical. So I've been very, real. I'm not working. That's it. I'm not working. Everybody's asking me, could you do this, that? I don't know. And so my sabbatical ends next July.
Okay.
And then it's an open field. And my attraction here, because I've went into deep study of meditation and the Buddha and, mystical teachings. And I did groups at the Osho Ashram, the No Mind group. I did, I went in a monastery and, realized I had been a Buddhist Tibetan nun in a past life. I was very touched by the nuns. I interviewed them. I thought maybe I have to become a nun myself again. And then I realized, no, this is not for me.
Yes. Yeah.
But basically, there is a tendency of wanting to realize that when you are 80, you are entering the phase where you have to prepare your departure. Therefore, you have to let go of attachments. And so I'm working on this, and then I've devised, the ultimate koan. Here is Margot's Tantra koan. See if you can resolve it. Okay?
Yep.
Everybody ready? How can you develop the art of being desireless at the height of desire? And if you resolve this koan, it will teach you to one of the roots of the Buddha's teachings. Okay? And I'm now looking into, this is a very bad title, and I'm sure that my teachers, my enlightened teachers would berate me for saying that, but I'm going to say it. A shortcut to enlightenment. And the reason why I got to that point is like this. I did a month-long silent meditation retreat recently, not the one in the monastery, but the one before.
Yeah.
And at the end of this retreat, I had a catharsis with God. And I got very mad at God. And I said, listen, God, Goddess, you guys, you really did a bad job. You produced, elements, humans, and you manufactured them, you produced them so badly that they have to incarnate again and again and again to clean up the mess that they have left in the previous life that they don't even remember about. So, there the game is rigged already. Why couldn't you create humans that just need 2 lifetimes and then they wake up and they're done? And I had the most hilarious answer from God.
Tell me. I'm curious.
And the answer was, Margot, just imagine what would happen if this had been the case. We would have a completely overpopulated paradise. We wouldn't know where to put all these souls. And then I started to imagine traffic jams in paradise. And I thought, okay, they're taking their time, so that they can kind of create the space in paradise. Okay. So then I thought, well, one of the roots of my success is because I created this shortcut to therapy with my central channel there.
Yeah.
But now, is there a shortcut to enlightenment? So there probably isn't. Otherwise, it would have already been found, But I'm looking, who is, finding these things? And I'm finding out very interesting things. And I'm going to work on this particular topic, which will lead me to explore the possibility of bringing more of the Buddha's teachings in the bedroom or into the Tantric sphere. Because actually all the enlightened teachers I work with always talk about the qualities of enlightenment. Like, compassion, of course, is one of them. And anicca, anicca being equanimity, and being aware of, what repulses you and what attracts you and how you lose yourself in those directions. So it's such an interesting topic to bring, this level of spiritual awareness into your Tantric dimension, because Tantra is the path to awakening, really. We talk about sex a lot because the Western civilization has been so repressed about sex. Then you have to ask yourself why. And the reason is very clear. The governments and the religions want us to be, contained about our sexuality because they know that if we become blissful human beings, we are uncontrollable. Okay, we become sovereign beings, and there's no controlling, no containing us. And who's going to pay their taxes when they want to be blissful all the time?
Who's going to pay the taxes if we're blissful, uncontrollable humans connected to source?
Right. So anyway, now that's why we love to be in Ubud and in Bali, is because that's the place where spiritual rebels come to hang out.
There's definitely a fair share of those around here, for sure.
Right.
So two questions coming up, and I love what you share around enlightenment. And I feel like this word in spiritual circles gets thrown around in a lot of different ways, and people talk about enlightened masters, and I'd love to just hear like a grounded framework of, for you, what really enlightenment means. And is that something that's even really attainable when we're in this human body? Some people say that you can, but I find there's also the place of, we're eating and we're shitting and we're getting happy, we're getting sad. And where is that place of that like enlightenment in practical day-to-day life? Like, where does that exist?
Well, Osho has a very nice quote about this. He says, enlightenment is a process that begins but never ends. Okay. Now, I've had many enlightenment moments in my life, and I could kind of like qualify them as saying that I'm sitting on a pillow and I'm completely 100% happy and satisfied with everything. And I don't need anybody, and I don't need a partner, and I don't need a teacher, and I don't need anybody. I am done. Okay? That is a space that men hate in a woman. Okay? Or that is a space because it's very threatening to them. The moment a husband or a boyfriend sees that their woman is complete, and they don't need them anymore, they've lost their role. What are they going to do? So they come in and they try to bring in all their troubles and their contradictions and, kind of suck off the enlightenment. And then she gives, her love and presence because she thinks that maybe her enlightenment will be able to kind of détendre, as we say in French, kind of get over onto them to help them out. And that doesn't work, unfortunately. And so basically then she loses it. She loses that perfect moment of perfection. So then, okay, it goes on. Now, I woke up, one time, and it was an incredibly beautiful experience, and it lasted 6 months. Okay. And it was again my second husband who brought me out of it, as I was saying. But I believe that these cumulative moments of awakening have their presence and their function in a mysterious way. And one of the ways for me has been to bring down the impression of stars and stripes, that we have about enlightenment, fairies flying in the sky, and the magic wand touching your forehead and all the things we went through in India. And simply arriving at a place where you are in a kind of a place of stabilized contentment. Okay? Contentment is there, and it's not there dependent on so many things or people. And stabilized, exactly that, because it is your nature. It is you being you. So, that is what I would say, is a stepping stone to enlightenment. But in that situation, there's still ups and downs. And, when you read the details of, the story of the Buddha, I read an incredible book recently that I really loved, and that was one of the best books on meditation called Mindfulness, Bliss and Beyond. And it was by a man named Ajahn Brahm, who was a monk. That's how I ended up in this monastery in Perth. He wrote that book. So in there, he's mentioning stays quite close to the Buddha, even in the Pali language, the Buddha's language. And he mentions these levels, which, of course, if you're ambitious like me and probably you, you begin to scratch your head and say, aha, this is what I want to conquer, which is, of course, a trap. But the levels are, okay, so you sit in meditation. Now, first of all, I had to get to the point where you can sit your body on a pillow and you have zero pains anywhere. That's already an accomplishment, for which I have to say, Jeremy, our friend, helped me immensely.
Beautiful.
Okay, so then after that, the body can leave the pillow, you can start to fly. Then your breath starts to disappear, and then your sensory perceptions start to disappear. And then if you can stay in that space, stay and stay and stay for long periods of time, you start to have these psychedelic manifestations that are completely mysterious and which you cannot control and you don't know where they come from. And there are these kinds of revelations that come from mind with a big M. Okay? And they're called anicca. So this author talks about the various levels of that. And obviously it's clear he went through them. And so I went to his monastery and I chose the right place in the group room, and everything was right. And I had the most beautiful experiences, but the only problem was, I don't know if I should say that, publicly, but, you often have a fantastic book and a fantastic author, and you think that, their Dharma talk are going to be like an extrapolation of their book. And then you get there and you have a doting grandfather who is kind of answering the questions of their audience, which is, their trouble or whatever, they're having their difficulties in meditation. And he picks out an old memory that he calls an imicca, a simile, which is an example, which is kind of like a boring old memory from some adventure he went through in his life. And, he's teaching about mindfulness, which is witnessing in the present moment. And he's all the time going back to the past to bring some kind of old story, And that's where I realized, I've been to too many masters and I've done too many practices and I don't have patience for these kinds of things. So I had to bring in my patients, and so I didn't get much of his Dharma talks, I must say.
Yeah, didn't quite land.
No.
Couldn't quite feel him.
But why was I saying you that? About enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, you struggle. You struggle with your ambition. You struggle with your let go. It's not easy. Meditation isn't easy, and I'm talking about not the beginning stuff. I'm talking about. So because I was a Buddhist nun, Tibetan Buddhist nun in a past life, I'm very attracted to the nothingness of it all.
Nothingness. Well, I mean, I was speaking with you earlier this morning, and I was speaking about Padmasambhava Baba.
Yeah.
Had enlightenment, supposedly in Yabyum, and having that with his consort, and I love the fable of that, as well as the reality in one way, shape, or form, and wondering, like, can that reality also exist in today's world?
Yes. And I'll give you 2 examples.
Tell me.
Okay. I went to Bhutan several times, and as you may know, Bhutan, adores Buddha Padmasambhava. It's the place where he flowered. That's why they have the monastery of the Tiger's Nest, which was built, which is an incredible place. You have to visit that place. If you love Padmasambhava, you have to go there. But, it was built over one of the caves where he did his hermitage with Yeshit Sogyal. And, their central practice, which is described in a book called Sky Dancer, was the Yabyum. Okay? And through revelations and visitations from Padmasambhava in this life, I was able to develop the 7 steps of being able to master as deeply as possible the Yabyum process. Now, it's very interesting to note that in Bhutan, I was with a very good guide and friend who took us to many monasteries where unfortunately you're not allowed to take pictures. And one of them was a very old monastery, beautiful, like a round building. And you went in, and at the first level, you walked around, it was completely round, were all the unenlightened human beings. So there were people quarreling and dogs barking and people falling in the water and people having fights and, So then you climbed on a very rickety old ladder, which, you could have fallen off any moment. You got to the 2nd floor, and there was the beginning of waking up, but there was the Buddha giving blessings, and there were people offering, bringing offerings to the Buddha and, all these things. The spiritual dimension was waking up. Then you climbed the rickety old ladder and, more and more broken. And you got to the last floor. And what did you get? You get only Yabyums. Buddhas in Yabyum. You had the white Yabyum, the green Yabyum, the red Yabyum, the yellow Yabyum, and the golden Yabyum. And what is it? Is it that the awakening is when you go to the origins of the mother-father, male, female, original creation, which is the marriage between energy, Shakti, and consciousness, Shiva. And when they merge, they produce the universe. And when you go to the monastery of the Tiger's Nest, there are many chambers and they're not always open to the public. I had the good fortune the first time that they got it all open. And the top one is an incredible room. And it's like cobalt blue with only golden Yabyums floating around the ceilings and the walls.
Wow.
And a completely beautiful golden shrine with golden Buddhas and golden Yabyums. That is, the highest manifestation of the Yabyum enlightenment, you could say.
Wow.
And I called it in my book, Riding the Wave of Bliss. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's a space I felt in my own lovemaking where definitely, I feel I met God for the first time, seeing that in the eyes of my beloved, being able to connect to something beyond just this 3D reality into something far, far greater. And I also see how, the West and just society is, blasphemized this connection between God and sexuality, where, in so many ways it's so deeply intertwined. And what shocks me the most is just how much that has infiltrated our world, and seeing and, hearing these stories that are well beyond just our present day reality, see so deeply connected, even looking at, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, like this connection that's always there through history. And then even now looking at spiritual traditions that somehow try to deny sexuality. And it's shocking to me, and to really feel like my soul, when I see that and I hear these stories, is like, okay, I feel the resonance of coming home. I feel the resonance of deep knowing. And then I also feel the density of that first layer of what you're speaking about in that, in the temple that so many people are in. And, that I kind of question sometimes, like, if, I guess, conversation of God, like that density is a necessity, and does it always need to be, in that sense, like that density to be able to connect heaven and earth, be able to connect all these pieces, to be able to love thy partner, love thy neighbor, like, is that density an absolute to be able to reach that enlightenment, or are we just, kind of fooling ourselves along the way?
Okay, is that density an absolute? Repeat that sentence.
Is that density that we have to navigate in life? So many times we think about going through the spiritual journey, and then we realize, way back in the beginning when I was so simple, that's actually, I had the answers. Looking at it from the child's perspective, like the enlightenment of a child, like looking into the eyes of a child and seeing the wise Buddha-like creature. And then we go on this journey of life and failing and succeeding and everything. And then, just towards the end of life, coming back, like, is that density a requirement, or is this all just a big cosmic joke? We might as well just laugh along the way.
What is the ultimate question, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think that the simple fact of being human puts you into the contrast of duality, and there's no avoiding it. Okay, the fact that you're just born into a body, that you have to deal with it, that you have to feed it, that, it's alive. And then, according to the Buddha's teachings that were very, very strong in those days, you are carrying the karma of your past lives. And so if you have a good life in this life, it's because you did good. It's very moralistic, by the way. Not so different than the Catholics.
Good and bad.
Yeah. But anyway, because you acquired good karma in a past life, So thinking about this in my retreat, I thought, well, then, it's very easy to start to feel like there is an entitlement point here, that if you did good in this life, which I considered I did, maybe,
you're doing very well.
Having built Sky Dancing Tantra and having it flower the way it's flowering. So that's already my ego saying that, okay? Because in fact, if I'm awake, this is absolutely not important, because there's no self here anymore, okay? There's no ego, there is no me to say I did this, I did that. This is all perfectly unimportant, right? But nonetheless, if I consider all these matters, I think, well, I was good in this life, therefore, if I had to be reborn, I will have a good life when I'm reborn. Or possibly I could even choose what kind of life. Okay, and then now when I'm talking or I'm looking or I'm listening to the Buddhists, like in that monastery, according to them, I have no idea on what level I'm going to be reborn. I could be reborn a mosquito. I could be reborn a cat, a dog. I think that doesn't make any sense, if you're... So there's, in all these people that are supposedly, passing the perennial teachings on down the line, there's tons of contradictions, So, but anyway, as far as the distance between, this dimension and the enlightened dimension, my best story, my simile, would be the story told by a master called Aravinda Himadra, who wrote an incredible book called The Immortal Self. And 3 lifetimes ago, he was part of a family of immortal masters who supposedly are still alive in a secret valley in the Himalayas today. And they're called the Amartyas. And somehow, intuitively, he was guided to them. And he arrived in that valley to discover that he was meeting one of the masters who had been his father 3 lifetimes ago, and who was able to work with him to clear a shadow he had on his heart about the death of his mother and so on. So this episodes, all these stories from this journey to visit the masters is amazing, because it shows you, yes, there is a place on this earth alive today, with enlightened masters who don't want to mix with the world, who are in a very protected area that supposedly has had no negativity for thousands of years, and who is sending their blessings wherever it's needed around the planet. So you read this book and you think this guy wrote it on ayahuasca, But because I know him fairly well and I've worked with him for 10 years, I would say he's honest, so whatever he's talking about, he went through it. So, that's happening too. So,
many realities here in this reality. And as we were speaking earlier, I mentioned the word tenderness, and you were saying there's something alive in you in that. I'm curious what that
thank you for picking it up. Well, I think that there's one race of people that are completely ignored in our culture today. And I'm scratching my head about this, and I don't know what to do about it yet. But it is, what do you do with the older people? The roles are very limited. If you have created children and a family and you've been lucky and you've had good karma, you have your place. You're the grandmother. If I talk about the women. You're the grandmother, you have your grandchildren, everybody's surrounding you, you get to see your children, all good. But if you have decided to sacrifice your normal life, like me, for the love of your teachings and your passion about exploring, Tantra, what do you do? You're 18 years old, you're an older woman, nobody pays attention to you, nobody's interested, nobody is going to think to have a date with an older woman unless they're fairly awake already and they have some, curiosity about sharing wisdom or something. And the one element which is missing the most, according to many of my friends of this age, is tenderness. The ability to be simply spending 15 minutes, 20 minutes in the arms of a person that shares from their heart tenderness with you, to nurture that part of your being. It's non-existent, And this is somehow something that I was having until recently. My friend is now leaving. I'm not going to mention names, I'm going to miss that, because he was a very skilled. He was a tantrika who didn't know he was a tantrika. That happens.
For sure.
And also it happens that a woman sometimes can take something that she shares with someone and she transforms it into a beautiful psychedelic tantric experience, and the other one doesn't even have a clue about it.
I've been there in my earlier days, for sure.
So anyway, I'm saying, we, the women, the grandmothers, had such an important place in some of the indigenous cultures of the time, in the Amazon and so on. We have no place here in this culture that is going on, I feel that every group, every man's group, should have a moment to open up the floor to the wise grandmother,
Love that. Well, the floor is open at any time with one of my groups.
Really?
We'd love that. Absolutely.
Okay, well, invite me into your next men's groups. And I have no idea, I have no agenda, I don't know. But I would like to, have an experience to impart to the consciousness of these men that are so busy and exciting about, picking out the best cake in the pastry shop, and they have 4 cakes per man, so much available. Yeah, I understand all this. I went through it, but then there's many other realities, and there's many other dimensions in Tantra, and there is the perennial fairy tale which exists in every tradition, which is that if the prince or the princess arrives and kisses the frog, she turns into a goddess. But then, there's also the tradition in Tantra that that the old woman shows up and she's perfectly disgusting. I played that one out with one of my boyfriends. He was beside himself. I played that witch dimension. He was, But anyway, so the old woman shows up. Bali is full of these statues. You look at the statues, you see all the old demonic women with their pendulous breasts and their hanging tongues. And, what do you think that represents? It's like, these are witches, they are magicians, they are part of the psyche of the human beings, and they are completely ignored in the tantric considerations of today. Pity.
Well, I love that you bring that forth. And, one of the things I appreciated, I think it was a couple of years back, and we were spending some time together, and you said, Aaron, I'd love if we went out on an adventure together. We went for a nice waterfall, and every time we catch up, we always do fun things. I appreciate in that just your directionality of what you want and desire. And I feel like that there's a tenderness and a vulnerability in that I think creates more deeper human connection between people.
But it's not that important. I'm very happily living without it, but I'm watching the culture. I'm watching what's going on around here, and I'm saying, that's a missing point. It's a missing point that, and the people that are not paying attention to that, they're complaining about the unwise behaviors of their girlfriends. And they're going around and around in circles, starting again every 3 months, repeating more or less the same things, Well, why don't you get a little bit open your mind and heart to, the grandmother? The grandmothers have a very important part in many of the indigenous cultures of the world.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Yeah. Well, I'm thoroughly enjoying these conversations. I feel like you and I could talk for hours and hours about all this. I love it. And one of the questions I'd love to ask you is, I'm just about half of your age. So if you could speak back to I'm 41, if you could speak back to your 41-year-old self and where you are now, what would be 3 things that you would want to communicate to that 41-year-old self, especially around love and sex and leadership?
Well, there is only one problem in this, is that at my age, my memory is completely shifted and changed, and it's much more a presence in the now, and it doesn't really have such a clear vision of what was then. I remember parts and pieces and scenes and stories, but I don't really remember who was this Margot when she was 40 years old. What was she doing? But okay.
See what's there. See what Spirit says.
Well, I would say the same thing. Practice Tantra every chance you get. I did that. Take sacred moments in your life, and when you've made your money after a seminar, and your bag is full of gold, take a week off and go into some kind of ecstatic, wonderful, exotic place and set up a tantric practice, schedule. And realize when you do that thoroughly that you will enter into a practice that you calculated to last an hour, and it will surprise you that it lasts 4, 5, 6 hours, and you come out of there half illuminated and completely inspired about what you want to share with the world. And I think that more people should be doing that.
More tantric practice grounded into day-to-day life.
So three advices. Okay, Um, you know, practice Tantra, live well. If someone offers you an incredible piece of land, instead of having the attitude that you had in the past that you didn't want to own anything, buy it. That would be one thing. So that you had some kind of grounded place like you did yourself, And whenever I had these incredible golden opportunities, I let them go. And then another thing I would say is be aware that you have attackers in the house of finances. And so these attackers are waiting to kind of steal your money. And so now you have more time to find, what are the rituals and what are the magicians and what are the ways to counter these attackers so that, you don't end up like I have ended up, with having many, many experiences in my life where my savings and my money were stolen up to the tune of 300,000 euros and so on. But, I think it was to teach me the joy of being in the now, whether you have money or you don't have money, and I think that's important. It's kind of a detachment. So I would say, yes, learn about detachment. I would say, those are the points.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for your time and energy and beautiful presence you bring here. And I just appreciate you. I love our friendship together. I love our conversations, and just very grateful for who you are as a being and everything you brought into this field. It's a deep pleasure to have you in my life.
Yeah, and thank you for the same to you. I feel it's always a pleasure to hang out with a beautiful, aware, and loving man. And I'm only protesting about one thing.
Tell me.
And that I think that you're taking way too long to be away from here. And now you build yourself a beautiful house in which you want to write a book, and you're succumbing to all the temptations of the 10,000 invitations that people are giving you, and you go here and you go there and you go here and you go there. What is this about? Why don't you create in your schedule the possibility of coming back home once in a while?
I appreciate you sharing this, and you're definitely not the first one to say that. So but my life in Bali will be landing more and more, and I'm slowly not going to be traveling as much as I am. But I love that you shared that.
Yeah.
That's really hitting home. So
okay. And thank you for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And wishing you the very best.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.